This podcast is brought to you by Kempower, the reliable, quick, and scalable EV charging solutions for everyone and everywhere. And StarCharge, the largest EV charging manufacturer in the world, and is also a provider of residential and commercial battery storage. Welcome back to the Out of Spec Podcast. I'm your host, Francie, and here we talk about everything electric, from EVs to public charging to the electric grid and much, much more. Today, I am joined by my colleagues, Jordan and Kyle, who recently attended the CES show, the Consumer Electronics Show, that has a tremendous amount of technology on display, plenty to see and learn about. And we're going to focus on what they saw today in terms of EVs and EV charging, and maybe a little more fun things thrown in there too. So yeah, thanks guys for joining me. How was the trip?
Can I point out, that's just like saying EGMP platform.
I was going to say, that's like ASAP as possible.
Sorry, we're just nitpicking. The S in CES stands for show.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fine. It was a fun show. Insanely huge. For those who don't know, like 130,000 people attended this year. That's like the population of my hometown city. So it's
a lot.
It was a lot. And as you traverse the halls, you hear 30,000 different languages and a lot of companies. Korean. Yeah, a lot of Korean, some Japanese, but just so many companies. Ones I've heard of, like we went to see our favorites, but also a lot that I was like, I didn't know you were a thing. So it was pretty wild. And I think every year we see a gradual increase of EVs and charging companies. Although some just like don't show up certain years. It's kind of interesting. And some, like Honda, just came back after a hiatus and unveiled the most concepty concepts we've ever seen. Which, that's a whole rant for Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you can rant about all that. And yeah, of course, there's a huge display. I mean, everything technology trends that I'm sure you saw running through, whether it's in the automotive industry or not. But like you kind of referenced this, but these kind of shows attract, of course, huge crowds, but also different attendees, like different hosts, booths and stuff. And I know that we attend a lot of shows. Is this the one that y'all anticipate most every year?
I think I'm most intrigued because it is so huge. You know, the LA Auto Show, the Chicago, the New York Auto Shows, we show up and we know pretty much exactly what's going to be there. And it's almost, challenging. I mean, you were with us in LA. It was like, okay, what content can we film? Because most of these cars have been out for what feels like a decade. You can't even always sit in them or drive them. You're finding the little nuggets of new things. Whereas CES is humongous. There are literally, I don't know how many hundreds of companies there. And there's so many weird, quirky niche things, which are super cool. I ran into an EV company that's based out of New York that builds something in Detroit, and it's probably vaporware, never going to come out. But it's just like, that was cool and kind of weird and quirky. And the guy who was like at the booth, like wasn't even that passionate about it. He's like, yeah, I don't know if these are going to be made. And I was like, nice. I'll film a TikTok. Anyways, and it's just funny how many things show up there that we don't even know exist. So I think I'm more excited about CES than the other auto manufacturer or the auto shows, because also this is not just auto. Like if you go to LA Auto Show, you're like, oh wow, a charger. It's not plugged in. Whereas this is like
that was every charger at the auto show in LA was not plugged in.
Whereas this one, I'm curious to hear some of Kyle's take, because I think Kyle went through a bunch more charging booths than I was able to get to. So I'm curious to see the state of charging, if we can borrow our friend Tom's channel name, of what it was at CES, because there's so many companies now. And I don't know, are we remotely close to saturation, or is this just like we need as many companies as possible doing this, and what makes them different from the others?
Yeah, well, all good questions. And I agree. CES is the big show of the year, I think, from our side, because it's a great way to start the year. It's where everyone is debuting their 2024 product line for charging or cars or whatever it would be. It's a great way to start off January with so much content. So we're never at a lack of content at the beginning of January, which is great. And, builds the relationships that we can set videos out throughout the rest of the year, which is always a nice thing for us. Like we already have, I don't know, at least 15 or 20 ancillary videos that will come after us visiting and meeting with people. And we're scheduling visits to Europe and China to go meet with these companies. And there's just so much business that happens after CES, but that stems from the show. So I'm excited. CES is the North American auto show. Now it has taken the top place. Crazy enough that the Detroit North American International Auto Show wants to like compete next year with CES. And I'm like, no one's going to show up to Detroit. Why would you put it on the 10th? We're all going to be in Vegas. So that's dumb. And I just, I don't know. Everyone's kind of annoyed with that. But anyway, sorry, Francie, go ahead.
Well, I saw you tweet about that, and I was interested to hear your take. It kind of makes sense. I feel like the auto shows, they're also just such a narrow scope that could be included just in a larger tech show, like you're saying. But to try to compete, I feel like these shows also bring a ton of tourists. I mean, of course, the CES was in Las Vegas, which people are like, all from all over the world. They're like, yeah, I'll go to that show for multiple reasons. It's in Las Vegas, but to host in Detroit, which has the history, of course, but I feel like it might just bring people in from Michigan.
Who wants to go to Detroit? Actually, Detroit's gotten way better over the recent years. But yeah, it's fun. Like Chicago Auto Show in February? Worst time to go to Chicago. Detroit in January, worst time to go to Detroit. Vegas in January, that's totally doable. I mean, it was like cold for all the people in Vegas were like, oh my gosh, I'm bundling up. And meanwhile, I was like, maybe I'll bring a hoodie. It's 50, maybe short sleeve, maybe hoodie. I don't know. I did wear the Marquez Brownlee hoodie, and multiple people asked if I worked for him, which was really great. But it is, I agree with Kyle. It is like the North American show for what we see in the US, but it's also so much more global than I realized. Like a lot of companies are at CES that are not even targeting America at all. I mean, right. TOG, for example, they had the second or maybe tied for the biggest booth along with Kia, and they don't even sell in North America. And I, ignorantly, I think at first was like, oh, they're like a concept car that's hoping to come out. No. They're already making cars and selling them in other countries and regions. And that's who they were there for. And there's a lot of other companies that do the same thing. They're like, there's different Asian companies interfacing through CES. And I was like, well, it'd probably be easier if you just did it over there. But
right, just
sure, come over here. Vegas does have great Asian food. We had some amazing Asian food. So that's all. I'm always down to go to Vegas, but it is true. Like this time, especially, I was like, holy cow, there's so many companies based in China and Korea and Japan. And I want to go over there and see what they're doing like on their home turf, because there's just so much stuff happening in China that people don't really realize here. I want more people to go to CES because it makes you open your eyes a bit beyond, the US EV and charging situation.
That's a good point. Yeah. Interesting global perspective. Kyle, anything to...
well, I think we should talk charging for a second because, of course, we cover cars and charging on our reviews channel. And the charging portion is the most interesting. You have some of the biggest players out there. I'm talking ABB from the beginning, of course, Autel, and a few other of the big household names that we're used to seeing. But then also so many startups that are like just white labeling, repackaging, and some of them are super legit, like Star Charge, who actually sponsors this one. Of course, I'm going to say they sponsor us. I mean it regardless. Like they are literally the largest EVSE manufacturer in the world, but like no one's ever heard of them. And then you get companies that like no one's ever heard of them and no one probably will ever hear of them, that just like are here one year and they won't be here the next. And they're just selling boxes with cables attached to it with, zero knowledge base of their product, zero understanding of how the US system works. And it's such a wide breadth. So I feel like we go there, we figure out who's legit, who's not, who do we want to work with, who do we not want to work with? Because everyone wants to like do a video with Out of Spec, which is really cool. We're lucky to be in that position. But like, I don't want to be promoting crap. You know what I mean? So we basically go there and meet with the people. And for me, it's all about people. If they're knowledgeable, the engineers are on site, if they can stand behind their product, if they can show me products in the field that are working repeatably over a long period of time, I'm game. We need reliable charging products. But so so many of these companies are like, I'm like, oh, how many kilowatts can this do? And they go, kilowatt, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh my God, not only is there a major language barrier, which we can't, of course, get frustrated at that, but like there's a zero knowledge base for half of these people. So it's really cool to go there and sort out what's legit, what's not. The big trend right now in charging is, well, I would say there's two big trends. The big boy players, the one who's been in the industry, they are focusing on reliability, user interface, and making sure that that customers have a well thought out, amazing charging experience. That's what's needed. And then you have the new guys that are like, we're cheaper than everyone, and it's basically this ugly ass box that you plug some wires into. Who knows how long it'll last? Who knows the temperature or altitude ratings? They don't know. So there's like these split levels. And it's like, if you're a CPO, many of them are just going to go, okay, I want a 240 kilowatt all-in-one charger, and I want the cheapest one. And they're just going to get stuck with crap. And so that's what I'm seeing. Jordan, did you kind of notice that as well?
Yeah, and I think, not to continuously reference Tom's channel, but it reminds me of the issue with all the EVSEs, basically what we think of garage chargers, I guess, that are available like on Amazon, eBay, or even from specific sites. And so many consumers don't know how to cross-shop them or compare them. And Tom's doing important testing with that because there's so many that are maybe not quite certified, or they've like skirted the certification just enough, or people don't even know to look for certification. I mean, that logic applies with, for example, Apple chargers. I mean, sure, there's a lot of like eBay or gas station chargers that will work, but they're not technically certified. I did have one catch fire one time, so I was like, ever since then, I've like, okay, I'm just gonna get the certified ones, because that's a little terrifying. But it's more scary when you're dealing with way more voltage, and so that's why I think it's really important that people find chargers that are actually good. And marketing is one thing. It's really easy to market a really crappy product, and that unfortunately sells them a lot. We see this with cars too. Maybe not selling them, but just like the whole vaporware situation, concept cars that will never be made, but their marketing is insane, their website's perfect, and they take $100 and then disappear. And it's like, well, who saw that coming? That's why it's good to get like nerdy and gritty and see what's underneath the surface. And it helps meeting, like Kyle said, some of the people behind the company. If you can even just talk to a single person there, you can probably gauge a bit how real or knowledgeable or well built they are. So it's going to be an issue for a while, I think, but just we need more knowledge base, I think.
Yeah, it's really interesting because these are really, really important things that you're integrating into your life, like putting into your garage, charging your EV, perhaps putting yourself at risk. And the fact that getting off-brand or like, aftermarket products is so accessible, but not, honestly, sometimes not the safest option, makes Tom's work, our work, other people's work in truly investigating them, like you said, meeting the team, but testing them and understanding the standards and regulation and policies and all the nitty-gritty details behind it important for our audience. So really interesting. Kyle, you mentioned that there's a focus on creating an amazing charging experience. Would you argue that an amazing charging experience is one that you don't even have to think about? What makes an amazing charging experience for a customer?
Well, let's do a whole podcast on that in the near future. What is sort of needed on that side. But I think everyone gets the idea at CES from a charging perspective, which is you can go for the really well thought out, high quality, nicely engineered stuff, which is going to be more expensive, or you can go for boxes with crap inside that's going to be less expensive, and both fill a niche and both fill a need. So from the car perspective, I would say there was less exciting car news this year. Last year, I was able to film the VinFast VF8 and drive it for the first time. I was able to bring the Polestar 3 to the market, first YouTube review of that one at last year's show. And so there was a few, I think even a couple more cars that I was able to film that we hadn't seen before. There was no new car at this show that's going to come to production other than some concept stuff. Right, Jordan? I think we'd seen VF9 before. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess this was technically VinFast unveiling for the North American market the VF3, which is amazing. 17 inches shorter than a Fiat 500e, if that tells you anything.
I'm so excited for that little thing.
Yeah, and they did unveil what I will argue is one of the less, at least from the outside, one of the less concepty concepts, the VF Wild, which is a pickup truck. And they're seeing all these pickup trucks going crazy in the US, and they're like, oh, heck yeah, we're going to jump on that market. Who knows if they actually
build do that, they need to get their shit together and build a good car. They just need one good car.
Yeah, and they need one good car, and yet they have what, VF 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and this truck concept. They keep like doing other things. They get distracted before they like refine one product. I'm not really sure why, other than the fact that every time you unveil something, huge headlines. I mean, everything had headlines about these concepts they were unveiling that you couldn't even like really look inside. I mean, the truck you could look inside, and it was the inside of the truck was.
Why does the industry get excited about these things? That I don't understand.
It's something new and flashy, and something they can share photos of on social media, and that's gets them really excited. And a lot of people do the first impression of a vehicle is always the design, and then the nerds start looking at the specs and cross-shopping compared to the sheets and everything. But the design is what gets people in the door, and so that's why it's really easy for manufacturers. They understand this. That's a whole other podcast topic maybe is concept cars in general, and their place in the industry. But it gets people intrigued and thinking about it shows off their design language, first of all, for the future looking forward. So I don't know. The truck looks very VinFast. I think it actually looks fantastic, but I don't really want to spend much time on it because it's like they may not actually make it. I would love to drive the VF8 and the other ones. I mean, the VF3 I think would be the most fun thing to try out here in Colorado. 125 miles of range, totally reasonable. But even then, that's a figure they just threw out there. So it's hard to sift through the like actual facts versus what they're just throwing out there with an asterisk next to it.
That's
a lot of cars.
And then also Honda had some vacuum cleaners on display. They're like dust buster. They called it a saloon, but it's a coupe. I don't understand. And then they have this space concept, which looks like a Hyundai Ioniq 9, would it be, or Ioniq 7?
Space Hub?
It's called the Space Hub. It does look like an Ioniq 7, but bigger and more van-like. And yes, the front and rear of these the fronts especially are just screens, and the rears are outlines. I don't know. It's like, it's a weird.
So
they're cool, but they won't ever look like that. That's the problem.
They're so concepty, and the whole point of those cars was for Honda to say, we're trying to make things lightweight and like going back to the drawing board with EVs, and we need less battery, and like they're good concepts, mentally speaking, to go along with the concepts physically, but like those don't necessarily go hand in hand. These were just kind of silly.
Here's how to appeal to an American audience. It's not with lightweighting and saving the planet. It's freaking 150 plus kilowatt hour battery packs and 300 kilowatt charging and long distance, and make the cars freaking usable. The thing is, Honda doesn't have a long range product as their halo. They got to start somewhere. They got to compete on today's playing field, and then you can lightweight and understand your audience and go with what they're looking for. But no one's going to have a compromised vehicle and go, well, actually, I weigh 200 pounds less than you do, so it's okay. I got to charge for another 10 minutes. That people don't think like this.
Yeah.
We have. Well, we have 5 years roughly left 6 years till 2030, when Honda says they're going to have 30 electric vehicles by then. And they have a Prologue coming built on Ultium, and then the Honda E, which they discontinued? They have the Moto Compacto, so we're good.
They have the Moto Compacto. I mean, the Honda Pilot is just such a reliable car. I want them to come out with just a electric Honda Pilot.
Or
just
did
something
you come up with that? Why? What's your connection to the Honda Pilot?
It's that was my mom's car, and then she gave it to my brother, and it lasted him until someone crashed into it on the road. But I mean, it's just, and my friend had it in college. It just runs. Like, you give it to your kid because it'll keep going. But
it could have driven away from that crash, I'm sure.
Yeah,
probably. Then he got a Tesla, so he did his upgrade. But I mean, so with all these concepts and stuff, I mean, one, will they make it? And Honda hasn't really proved that they can go concept to reality. And also, manufacturing using another automaker that hasn't had the best reputation lately in manufacturing their own EVs, right? Ultium, GM. So I don't know.
Well, Honda was supposed to do another platform with GM, and they've backed out of that now. So maybe they're wising up a bit. It's just across the booth from Honda was Mullen, who when they said our press conference is, and instead of a time slot, it just said after Honda's.
Great. Whatever Honda's done, we'll chime in.
Which is really funny. So Mullen unveiled the RS5 or the 5RS, whatever.
Did the mirror fall off of it?
Yeah, the mirror fell off during the unveiling. When they closed the door, it just fell off. And the spec sheet literally just copy paste everything Taycan does, and then they just put it on their spec sheet, and then with an asterisk saying targeted figure.
Nice. I love it.
And it got so many headlines.
Don't they want $300 and something thousand for that thing?
Probably.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm going to look up the price. It's the Mullen
5RS.
5RS. Good looking car.
Oh yeah, it looks good. Huge wing on the back.
So the Mullen 5 starts at $55,000, and the Mullen 5 RS starts at $300,000.
Wow.
Ooh, ouch.
Why?
Well, yeah, why? I mean, if it's exemplifying another car.
They can't build the $55,000 one, so let's build a $300,000 one.
Get that profit margin. Yeah.
And they're comparing it to an old Taycan in terms of specs because the new Taycan comes out very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of wait and see with the automakers. It sounds like nothing new, you said. In terms of NACS, the North American Charging Standard, of course, is the...
Francie, there was something cool from an automaker. And it was Mercedes. And it was this Will I Am sound system.
From Black Eyed Peas.
Yeah. And okay, first of all, this dude tried to start, I think, a couple car companies with modifying Teslas or something like that. Do you remember that, Jordan?
Know
that. Wasn't that a thing?
I remember headlines, but I didn't really follow it much.
Yeah. Anyway, you can now play music in your Mercedes EQ model. So if you're under 15 miles an hour, you get a bass track. If you turn the wheel, instruments come in. If you floor it,
you mean sound effects?
Yeah, but it's composing a whole song. So if you see
the composer.
If you see a Mercedes driving like a complete idiot around, they must be composing music. It's honestly kind of cool. I like the idea. That's fun. Yeah,
that is fun.
Damn it.
Jordan, that's what Jordan would look like with his lasers behind us, listeners. He has brought up his lasers. Okay, fun stuff, but nothing tremendously groundbreaking in the EV world from the automakers.
No.
Okay,
yeah,
so
it's all appearance, but not really concrete. But I mean, charging stuff seemed more concrete. And Kyle, how many NACS things did you see, or J3400 or whatever it's called?
Yeah, well, I think we're pretty much, so there's a lot of cable manufacturers there, and I spoke to them about, okay, how are you working through the UL process? How's the liquid cooling? 500 amp plus versions going. Keep in mind, the industry has always settled in at 500 amps is where we need to be, but most cars today are looking for 500 amps, at least in the US, Rivians, Mercedes EQs, BMWs, but we need more, and Tesla's 700 amps. So let's start. 500 shouldn't be the goal. 700 amps should be the new 500, and maybe 750 should be the new 500. Of course, as voltages go higher, it will become less needed, but okay. So, yeah, spoke to a lot of cable manufacturers. There still seems to be not one UL approved Tesla J3400 connector, which is why we don't see them in the public yet. So I'm talking aftermarket. So soon, it seems this is the year, a couple months. Amphenol had a ton of their cables all sitting on different chargers. So we know they're ahead. We saw a lot of Samwoo cables. We saw... Yeah, so 3400's coming along. Autel had a really nice level 2 unit with their NACS connection, but nothing that's happening as fast as the automakers want them to go.
Sure. And no one's saying, yeah, we found, what we think is going to work for us. They're still basically investigating companies like Autel.
Right. So and Autel is still we haven't made final selections on cable providers and stuff like that.
Okay. Interesting. Any other, you've talked about reliability, of course, user interface. It basically seems like a good charging experience. Of course, we're looking at NACS. It seems like we're not there yet. J3400 it's actually standardized, or the standard written only so recently. So I can imagine that that's going to take its time to move through the phases that it needs to. Anything
and
that
then
you...
Go ahead.
No,
Go ahead,
I
Francie.
feel like you're going to... Just anything else, Kyle?
Yeah, I was going to say, well, the CES was way more than just cars and charging. There was also sensor companies, LiDAR, radar, a ton of tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers, some inventors that were there that were, stretching the budget for a booth to showcase their new product, all the way to companies like Magna, who had half the floor and, 100 employees there or something. So, it was just a really cool spread, multiple halls. There were 3 main halls plus an off-site Venetian location, which had a lot of e-bikes and stuff, but not so much on the car side. A couple chargers stuff at the Venetian, and then there were 2 outdoor areas where Mercedes and BMW were doing test drives. There were some EA stations at a eVTOL sort of helicopter looking thing. Don't know what they were doing there, but there was a thing. And then, there was a lot of weird stuff. Obviously, some people were like, do you want to put your brand on this thing? And people said yes. It made no sense.
Sure.
There was the boring tunnel was ripping. They had over 100 cars going, was my understanding.
Nice.
And that actually worked out pretty well for us this show. I still don't understand why they don't just use a train or a tram, but whatever.
Yeah.
We never had to wait for a car. We just walked into one every time. And that was partially because we were the first ones to get there and the last ones to leave. So we were, away from the crowds for the most part. But it worked out pretty well for us. And we just shuttled to Resorts World back and forth as we always do. And nice show.
It seems like it was a nice show. Of course, I feel like AI, people are often showing how they're going to use AI. I feel like that's just being sprinkled across of every product, service, and even the industry, because they're trying to make cars drive themselves and all that stuff, whatever it is. But was that just a theme throughout as well?
Yeah, massive. AI will take over and transform desk jobs. If you're an accountant or a day trader or something, AI is just coming so fast and people don't realize it. And the capabilities and the speed at which it gains capabilities is just something I can't even begin to wrap my head around. So I have no idea what the future holds, but it's going to be totally different than what we know as today. 3 years from now, our entire landscape will be changed because of AI, is my guess. Amazon Web Services, AWS, had a huge, I think, value proposition adding to the vehicle purchase and ownership experience, from a configurator to handling the delivery of the car to the purchase itself of the vehicle, all the way down to the recycling at the end of life. So that was pretty cool. And lots of cool stuff all around. AI, robotics were 2 main topics of the show, but less focus on full self-driving. There was less autonomous buzzwords being thrown around. People are like, that's hard. Let's do something more manageable.
Sure. Yeah. Totally get that. And I mean, of course, this is all future oriented, but it makes me think, are people is the approach, you think, that folks at this show, these technology companies, are they building the future or trying to predict it and prepare for it?
Both. They're trying to do both. Succeeding is a different story, but it is interesting how the buzzwords, AI is a huge buzzword that can play into a lot of autonomy things. But then, with recent headlines of issues with Cruise, for example, that was a subject not many people touched on. And maybe they were even preparing booths centered around complete self-driving. And then recently with headlines, it's there's a lot of negative stigma around that. Maybe we'll not touch on that so much as just talk about our sensor suites and what they're capable of, but then you're not pushing that very hard. So I don't know. It is being sprinkled in everywhere. It feels like Oprah's out there just saying, you get AI and you get AI. It's funny, VW made headlines with ChatGPT being integrated with their IDA situation.
Well, that was interesting because that's not through Cariad. That's through another company.
Yeah.
Which
Cerence.
that you would think that would all be done through Cariad, but I guess not.
And I wonder how those interact. I want to do more research on that, and I think there's a lot to discover and explore with that, because I think that's a huge issue. Just in general, our virtual assistants are pretty dumb, and it's amazing how smart and good like ChatGPT is, especially with GPT-4 recently. So seeing that integrated intrigues me, because it's so frustrating to like use your car assistant and you want something done, but if you didn't say the phrase exactly how it's programmed, then it's just clueless. And so I see a lot of perks with that, and I'd love for it to just get smarter, like me being like, hey, I want to find a restaurant with rated 4 stars and above within 5 to 10 minutes of me. Just take me there. And because currently it's so hard to find some of those things. You have to cross-reference different apps to find the location, and even hours. It's just like, if you could just explore all the things for me and make a decision and then do it. There's another product called Rabbit that I want to explore a little bit that kind of does some of that, just using almost like traversing through your apps for you and finding solutions. So it's really fascinating to see companies with that approach. And Volkswagen, I don't know, I didn't get to try it, but I'd like to explore that a bit more because it sounds fun.
I
think we need dog-friendly hotels with charging. That's something AI could do.
Create or find for you along the way.
Yeah, find along the way, because what I have to do is I have to use hotels.com and PlugShare, and then I have to call the hotel to double check that not only is the charger available, but also is it actually dog friendly.
Yeah. It's one part of like training the AI the nuances of a language instead of us having to learn its language, and then also having it know us enough to make decisions for us, which I'm not so sure I'm down for AI making all the decisions, but I guess sometimes it would be nice to hand it away. Either way, really interesting stuff we got going on here. So we talked about charging. Of course, Kyle, you and Alyssa did a great walkthrough of CES, like Autel, VinFast, Luminar booth with Polestar 3, Cat, how the Caterpillar is going electric, Ioniq 5, Neo, ET7, Witricity, Xpeng, Aero HT, Amazon, Lucid, tons of things. So definitely check out that video for an in-depth tour if you like to walk around with Kyle and Alyssa. It seems like people are going forward. Electric is the future, but is there anyone who's just not going electric that you're like, come on, no matter what industry that they're in? No?
Oh, not that was at the show, at least. I think pretty much everyone's committed. And, we could do other podcasts on like companies like Toyota with their strategy, whether it's right or wrong. I could actually see the argument both ways. And
that's why they're doing all of the strategies.
Right. Yeah, they're doing. BMW is really the ones doing all the strategy. They're like, we want it all. True. But it was a cool show. Awesome time. Saw so many viewers. It was great to see everyone. And that's our audience right there, tech nerds. So we know our place, and we had a great time, and looking forward to it again next year.
Yeah.
Always.
Let us know if you have any questions about what they did and didn't see. Go watch the walkthrough in case they answer them there. But CES sounds like a really cool show. Would love to get to it one day. My cousin and I were talking about it. He was already watching YouTube videos about what was debuted, unveiled at the show. So thanks, y'all. Glad you had fun. Glad you learned some things. Seems like nothing is super, super groundbreaking, but we're seeing how things are moving through the industry, which is cool. Thank you for tuning into the Out of Spec podcast. We really appreciate your support, and we will see you next time on the next episode. Bye-bye.